Surviving 100 days alone and 99 nights in the forest was never about skill, courage, or mastery, because no matter how prepared one believes they are, fear exists as a constant companion, lingering in the corners of the mind, following each movement, manifesting in the twitch of leaves, the snap of a twig, or the sudden whisper of wind. And from the very first day, the forest felt impossibly close, almost sentient in its stillness, its trees standing like ancient sentinels, their limbs heavy with silence, the sunlight retreating far too quickly, fading with a subtle impatience that suggested the world itself was watching, observing, measuring each step. And in those initial days, survival seemed almost deceptively manageable. Gathering firewood, collecting edible roots and berries, hunting small animals with makeshift traps, constructing a crude shelter from fallen branches and thick leaves. And yet, even then, the nights revealed the true nature of this place. For darkness was not merely the absence of light. It was a presence, stretching shadows in impossible directions, amplifying every sound, turning even the tiniest movements into potential threats. And in that silence, one could feel the eyes of the forest, intangible but undeniable, watching, waiting for a misstep, for the faintest error born of fatigue or overconfidence. And I quickly came to understand that comfort was fleeting and routine could be fatal, because predictability invites disaster. And as the days passed, I discovered traces of those who had ventured here before, abandoned camps hidden beneath layers of leaves and dirt, broken shelters with splintered wood, cold fire pits, partially eaten meals, discarded tools and scraps of clothing, evidence that survival was possible, but only temporarily, that others had endured, perhaps thought themselves clever, and yet failed to leave a lasting mark. And by day 20, hunger had begun to gnaw not only at my body, but at my mind, a persistent whisper of need that shadowed every thought, forcing longer trips from the relative safety of my shelter, each one heavier than the last, each one a negotiation with exhaustion and alertness. And by day 30, the nights had grown impossibly long, stretching like living entities, the shadows shifting in ways that logic could not account for, trees seeming to lean closer when the wind stilled, and the forest felt less like a location and more like a presence, patient, unyielding, and indifferent, testing endurance rather than provoking direct confrontation. And survival ceased to feel like progress, becoming instead a mechanical act of existing, a delicate balance of gathering, conserving, and constantly measuring one's own strength against an unchanging environment. And every decision carried immense weight, whether to explore further, risk scarce food supplies for potential gain, or remain within the fragile safety of the shelter, knowing that each night offered new tests of awareness and patience. And by day 40, loneliness had begun to take root, embedding itself in every silence, amplifying every sound, twisting even the wind into imagined voices. The forest now less a collection of trees than a conscious observer, indifferent yet somehow responsive in subtle, untraceable ways, allowing mistakes to occur without interference, teaching the harsh lesson that survival does not require the forest to strike, it only requires it to wait. And by day 50, resources were harder to locate, mistakes became costlier, and the repetition of survival routines, gather, build, eat, rest, survive, began to erode mental stability, manifesting in sudden panic at minor sounds, the hyper-awareness of shadows, and an overwhelming sense that even the smallest error could unravel everything. And some nights were worse than others precisely because nothing happened, leaving the mind to wander through imagined dangers, every rustle or crack of wood magnified into threats, anticipation draining more energy than action. And by day 60, exhaustion had begun to shape every movement, slowing thought, narrowing margins for error, and small miscalculations, underestimating hunger, overestimating stamina, lingering too long outside the shelter, could have catastrophic consequences. Yet the forest offered no feedback, no reassurance, no indication of progress, only a quiet, indifferent constancy that forced observation and endurance, teaching that survival is less about heroism and more about sustained awareness. And by day 70, survival had become mechanical, stripped of excitement, joy, or even fear, days bleeding into nights and nights into days, repetition eroding the sense of time, self, and accomplishment, while the forest remained unchanged, unmoved, indifferent to planning, effort, or despair, forcing the realization that persistence is the only viable tool for survival. And by day 75, the mental strain had manifested in vivid, sometimes terrifying hallucinations, shadows appearing to move with intent, shapes forming in the corner of vision, voices whispering in the wind that were not there. And yet these phantoms served a dual purpose, terrifying but also teaching caution, focus, and awareness, because even illusions demand attention. And by day 80, every action became deliberate, stripped of hesitation and emotion, for emotion breeds hesitation, and hesitation in this forest can be fatal. Yet the forest did not become louder, more aggressive, or hostile. It remained constant, a silent, omnipresent force, testing patience, observation, and endurance. And as the days approached to 90, survival was no longer about progress or mastery, but about maintaining existence within narrow margins, negotiating the balance between hunger, fatigue, and the ever-present awareness that even one lapse could end everything. And the nights became longer in perception, stretching beyond imagination, shadows moving in impossible ways, every sound amplified and every subtle environmental cue examined and cataloged in the mind. Yet the forest's indifference remained, teaching that survival is less about conquering external threats than understanding oneself, one's limits, and the need to endure, to persist, to exist. And by day 95, even small accomplishments felt hollow, progress imperceptible, the repetition of gathering, resting, eating, and observing consuming both body and mind. And one's sense of time had blurred so completely that the line between days and nights became irrelevant, a continuous stretch of measured endurance. And when day 98 arrived, the final stretch felt no different than the first day, because confidence is exploited, familiarity is punished, and the forest had shown consistently that endurance, observation, and quiet persistence are the only constants that can sustain life here. And by day 99, each movement, each decision, each breath had to be conscious, deliberate, stripped of hesitation or indulgence, because the forest will neither reward nor punish overtly. It only exists. And in that existence, it teaches that the longest, quietest trials are often the hardest. And when day 100 finally arrived, there was no triumph, no exhilaration, no conventional relief, only the quiet, profound understanding that survival had been measured not by boldness, conquest, or heroism, but by the patience, awareness, and constant endurance that allowed to persist despite exhaustion, fear, repetition, and the quiet mental torments of isolation. And in that endurance lay the true reward, a story that the forest could not erase, an experience that shaped mind, body, and spirit, a knowledge of fear, patience, vigilance, and quiet persistence that could not be learned elsewhere. And as I stepped out of 99 nights in the forest on the 100th day, I realized fully that the forest was never an adversary in the traditional sense, nor had it required mastery, domination, or conquest. It had only demanded awareness, patience, and the ability to continue in the face of exhaustion, silence, monotony, and persistent uncertainty. And that is the essence of surviving 100 days and 99 nights in the forest. Fear is never gone, comfort is fleeting, progress is often invisible, and the only true measure of success is the ability to endure, to observe, to persist quietly, and to emerge with a story, a memory, and an understanding that life, like the forest, tests through patience, constancy, and relentless presence, and that the forest teaches most effectively not by striking, but by existing, by remaining, by waiting, and that enduring quietly, deliberately, and fully aware is the ultimate act of survival, a truth that resonates long after the final day has passed. And that story, that quiet endurance, is one the forest itself cannot erase, a testament to patience, vigilance, and the power of human endurance when confronted by the unyielding, indifferent rhythms of the natural world, leaving a mark not upon the forest, but upon the mind, body, and soul of the one who survives, fully, quietly, and deliberately.